So yeah, there was a lot of, successful managers when I was managing bands and just starting out, and I would just literally get on the phone, pick up the phone and say, can I come to a show? Can I come to your office? Can we sit down? And they would always give me the time of day, and we'd go through everything from label contracts, publishing contracts, deals they were getting done with agents, how to market your bands, all those sort of things. Now, I wouldn't necessarily take everything on board, but I would certainly learn from a lot of the mistakes they made. I would also make a lot of mistakes myself, of course, but I found that really sort of fast-tracked my career by doing that.
Welcome to the Music Business Facts Podcast, where successful music industry experts share their industry secrets that will help you take your music career to the next level.
G'day ladies and gentlemen, Rodney Holder's my name, and thank you once again for joining me here on Music Business Facts. And in today's episode of the podcast, I'll be presenting those facts to you from Chris O'Brien. But before I get on to Chris's interview, I did want to invite you over to Facebook, where I've started what I think is a pretty dynamic new group, and I've called that group the Music Industry Entrepreneurs Association. So if you're interested in making money from music, if you're interested in making money in any sort of way, shape or form in the music industry, then this is the group that I've put together in hoping to bring people over there where we can continue the conversation off the back of the podcast. You can also network with other like-minded individuals and just basically ask me any questions, anything really to do with making money in the music industry. So if you'd like to check out the Music Industry Entrepreneurs Association, I've set up a URL to get there. You can search for it obviously in Facebook or go to miea.biz and that'll take you to the group. All right, now on to my interview with Chris O'Brien. Chris is a bit of a legend in the Australian music scene. He's the general manager of touring for Destroy All Lines, which is a sort of a big touring music company here in Australia. And he's also the former general manager of Australia's now defunct touring festival called Soundwave. And Soundwave was pretty much the biggest heavy metal rock festival in Australia's history. It was an amazing festival, which it all fell apart. So during the conversation, we discussed a variety of things. Chris and I talk about, the music business in general. We talk about how to get into the industry. We talk about management and touring and tour management, festivals and pitching to gatekeepers and things like that. We also obviously do have a conversation about Soundwave and the demise of the festival. And we also talk a little bit about AJ Maddah, who was Chris's boss and a very colourful character. He's the guy that ran Soundwave. So, guys, Chris is a very knowledgeable person. He's got a lot of experience in the industry, and I really think there's a lot of good takeaways in this conversation. So without further delay, I really do hope you enjoy my conversation with Chris O'Brien. Like I said, he's the general manager for Destroy All Lines, and I'll talk to you on the other side of the podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Mr. Chris O'Brien, and he is the General Manager of Touring for a company called Destroy All Lines. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today on the podcast.
My pleasure, Rodney. How are we this morning? Good?
Very well, matey. And you're driving because you're on a meeting, so I can imagine you're a pretty busy guy. And again, I want to thank you for this.
No problem. Make the time.
Chris, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, mate, would you mind just telling my listeners a little bit about yourself personally and then tell us what being the General Manager for touring at Destroy All Lines means?
Sure. Yeah, my background started, actually, funny enough, running mobile discos in the country when I was a 15-year-old kid. And, where I grew up, there wasn't really a lot of sort of alternative music. So I had enough of the local guys playing enough crap, so I thought, I'm just going to start my own thing, and which went really well, and finished year 12 and then moved to Melbourne and started running punk clubs, really. Mm-hmm. We ran sort of nightclubs upstairs and then live bands downstairs. And back then we had, who played for us? Blink-182's first ever Australian tour, they played for us.
Nice.
No Fun at All, Lagwagon, SNFU, and then just a range of Australian bands back then, like 1 Inch Punch and Body Jar, all that sort of stuff. So did that for a couple of years and then got bored of it. Hadn't sort of quite found my niche, I don't think. So I started a record label, a publishing company, a booking agency, started promoting in Melbourne for other promoters. I was like their local rep. So I was doing that as well. So I probably had about 5 hats on at the one time, just trying to sort of find where I sort of fitted best, I suppose. So, and the management thing and the promoting side shot out to me the most. So I sort of quit everything else and concentrated on those 2 facets of the industry. and so I picked up Area 7 to manage when they were just first starting out, and they sort of exploded pretty quickly. So I sort of was learning as I was going along, and picked up another sort of 4 or 5 acts to manage with them. And then promoting-wise, I was working with Scorpion Entertainment in Adelaide, who was predominantly a punk promoter back then. He was promoting a lot of Swedish bands like 59 Times the Pain and Millencolin and Refused and stuff like that. So I was working with him, and also AJ was just starting out, so I was working with him on his first tours, like a lot of sort of hardcore and metal stuff like Entombed and Cradle of Filth and Strife. So yeah, I was doing that for a while, and then the management stuff really kicked off, and so I spent a fair bit of time travelling overseas, getting deals done in overseas countries, in Japan and Europe and the UK specifically for a lot of my artists, and then AJ also started to get busy at a pretty similar time with his promoting, and then I sort of got to a bit of a point, I suppose, where I had to make a decision: do I go full time with AJ or do I go full time with the management? And the promoting side of things really interested me, so I ended up sort of quitting the management side of things and solely focusing on promoting. So I joined with AJ probably back in, I don't know when it would have been, maybe 2003, maybe 2002. Mm-hmm. And then sort of Soundwave grew from there. The idea started as a one-off event in Perth with the Gravity Games. Soundwave was just a stage back then as part of that festival. So, and then we sort of took that to Brisbane and Sydney in 2007 and got a lot of success out of the back of that. And then 2008 we went national, and the rest is history with that one. And then it sort of took me to when that ended up in 2015. I received a call from Destroy All Lines, and sort of sat down with them and Michael Chugg and had a good chat, and it seemed to be a really good fit for me. I had a few sort of offers around, but these guys understood that I didn't want to solely promote anymore. I wanted to get back into artist management and work on developing a lot of young bands out there and giving them a leg up, and they really gave me the freedom to sort of chase whatever dream I wanted to. So I ended up sort of signing on with those guys, and it's been almost 2 years now, so I'm having a good time.
Mate, it's a pretty amazing story you tell there, Chris.
It's I suppose for me it was just a matter of, I just wanted to be happy in the job that I had. So not that you call on the job sometimes, but when I left, when I was going through high school, everyone around me was like, you're an idiot, you'll never make money out of music, and especially growing up in a really small country town. But my parents were incredible. They just said, look, you know what, as long as you pass year 12 and you've got that bit of paper behind you, we'll support you and do whatever you want to do. So they supported me financially really early on, which was great, and that gave me this sense of self-belief that, if I give it a crack and pour everything I've got into it, I'll probably make a success of it. And like any industry, you're going to have your ups and downs, but you're defined by your losses, not your successes. So the losses that I've had over the years and the down periods have, I think, just made me a lot stronger and give me more of a will to want to succeed. So it's been an interesting ride and one I've really thoroughly enjoyed.
Oh, fantastic, mate. Very good story. Some of those people that you mentioned played a big role in the development of my band in my career as well. So I was working with Arash and Scorpion, and we played with that Cradle of Filth show that he did, and so we didn't know each other back then, but it's that 3 points of separation, isn't it? Or was that whatever, something like that?
Yeah, it is. 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, that's the one.
It's a pretty small industry, and if you've been around in it for quite a period of time, you tend to sort of rub shoulders and cross paths with the majority of people at some point. So whether it's at an industry party, watching a band, at a conference, wherever it is, you tend to sort of run into people and relive the glory days to a degree.
Totally. And it sounds very entrepreneurial. Did you ever sort of think of yourself as an entrepreneur, or you just being a punk kid that wanted to make stuff happen, and that was, you just followed your passion and made it happen?
Look, I never really thought of it from an entrepreneurial perspective. It was more trying to find a space within the industry that gave me the burning passion and want and desire to get up every morning and try my best and go to sleep every night knowing that I've learned something and challenged myself. And, I suppose it was never, an entrepreneurial thing. It was more just finding that niche for myself. And it took me a while to get there, which was, a pretty challenging time in my career, I suppose, because, back then there wasn't really a huge amount of support. There was no real internet back then either, essentially. And so I really surrounded myself with knowledge. So every time I wanted to learn something new, I found people that were successful at it, who'd been through ups and downs, and I learnt from them. So I really sort of rode on the coattails of people and really learnt from them. So I never did a music business course or a management course or anything like that. It was a lot of, successful managers when I was managing bands and just starting out. And I would just literally get on the phone, pick up the phone and say, can I come to a show? Can I come to your office? Can we sit down? And they would always give me the time of day. And we'd go through everything from label contracts, publishing contracts, deals they were getting done with agents, how to market your band, all those sort of things. Now, I wouldn't necessarily take everything on board, but I would certainly learn from a lot of the mistakes they made. I would also make a lot of mistakes myself, of course, but I found that really sort of fast-tracked my career by doing that. So.
And that's very cool. Do you think that still can happen today? If anyone was listening to this, do you think it's as easy as, I can look up Chris O'Brien, there's his email address, send him an email, and I want to come and sit down with you and do what you did?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was only a few days ago I got a message on LinkedIn, actually, which I don't check all that often, but I check every few days. And I got this message out of the blue from this girl at Melbourne University who's doing a thesis, and, she just contacted me out of the blue and wanted to sit down and, just to have a cup of coffee. So I think we're doing that next week. So, absolutely, 100%. I regularly sit down with people who reach out. I mean, who am I to not give up at least 20 minutes or half an hour of my time for someone that wants to get into the music industry and learn about it from the ground floor. So, there's only so much you can learn in music business courses, which, don't get me wrong, I mean, they have merit to a degree, but I think getting out there and speaking with as many industry professionals and experienced people as you can is incredibly beneficial. Yeah,
look, I completely agree with you. And I guess, because I don't know if you know, but I teach music business at TAFE. And I think the one thing that we give with our diplomas and our training is that we just help them fast track the understandings of things like copyright and contracts and APRA and AMCOS and PPCA and all that stuff that a lot of musicians starting out don't know. But I agree with you. You got to get your hands dirty and get in and amongst it, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely you do. So, look, I don't think anything's changed, to be honest. I mean, the only thing that might have changed is, younger people's expectations when they get into the industry may not be the same as what they were back then. There might be a little bit of, this is sort of owed to me sort of vibe, which you tend to get a little bit more nowadays. But for the people that really desperately want to make it and are very passionate, you'll find that they will end up making it.
Yeah, that's. I was going to ask you. That's one of my questions. I was going to say that some people listening to this might go, "Well, that's well and good for you, Chris," but you started your career when no one knew who you were at a time when the industry was going quite well. It's different these days. It's much harder. There's less money, no record sales. What do you say to that thought?
Well, I mean, if that's the thought basis you have going into the music industry, then I'd say it's the wrong career for you. So, I mean, you've really got to be able to sort of fight tooth and nail and smash down walls and not take no for an answer. And, if you're coming into any industry with a negative thought set, then you're probably not going to be successful at it. So, I mean, I work with a lot of people at the moment that are in their sort of very early 20s that are incredibly tenacious and don't take no for an answer, but really want to learn and put themselves out there. And so, if you really want to make a go at something, it's really, the ball is in your court. So it really is a matter of doing all your research, working out what space within the industry you think you want to work within. If you're not sure, then try as much as you can and volunteer as much as you can until you find that niche. Yep,
totally agree. That's awesome, mate. Talking about that, there'll be people listening to this going, well, how could I get involved with, say, Destroy All Lines? What's the chance of me getting an internship, or how do I get a job there? Have you got any advice for anyone listening that's thinking about along those lines?
Yeah, we sort of we have regular interns that work with us. Actually, they normally hit up one of us in the office, or they'll hit up our just info@destroyerlines.com email address and really just ask the question. So, and when they do, we generally put our hand up and say, yep, no problem. And sometimes they'll be attached to one of our admin staff or a tour coordinator, or and they'll just sort of learn the ropes on the ground floor. And sometimes we'll put them with our street team management and learn how to do the grassroots stuff of flyering at shows and putting up posters and those sort of things. So, if people out there are interested, then it's just a matter of asking the question.
It's very cool, mate. Very cool. You spoke about in your story how you were doing all this, really cool stuff. I wanted to ask you how you were funding it. I get asked every year in my classroom, the kid that wants to put on the next Soundwave or the next big day out or whatever, and he sort of asks, or they ask, where do you get the money to do this? What have you got? What's your answer for that?
Work your ass off. When I first started, and I was running the record label, the booking agency, publishing, management, and the nightclubs, which was incredibly busy time of my life. None of them were really actually making any money. The punk club was doing pretty well, but we sort of had quite a few expenses. So, and the money we did make, we sort of put back into marketing, and we ended up actually paying to get a half pipe skate ramp downstairs, and that cost us thousands. And so we were all about just pump any money we would make back into the business. So for me, I actually called up my dad and said, look, I just need a job. I'll do anything. And he had a mate who was working at a fruit and vegetable company, and they prepared vegetables for like Qantas and Sizzler and all these chain restaurants. And it was just like chef quality people just sort of cutting up vegetables fine into all this sort of weird stuff. And so I went in for an interview and thought, I've got no idea what I'm doing. And the guy said, do you know how to cut vegetables? And I went, well, yeah, I suppose I could use a knife. And he just said, all right, well, you can start tomorrow. So I picked up a knife the next day and learned on the job. And I was doing that from 6 a.m. in the morning till about 1 in the afternoon. I did go and, probably spend 5 or 6 hours doing the management, the label stuff. And then the clubs, I was running clubs 4 nights a week. And I'd normally go in there at about 8 o'clock. And that would go to about 1 a.m. I'd go home, get 4 hours sleep and rinse and repeat, and off you'd go again. So I was pretty adamant that I just had to get money to sort of, finance the dream that I had. And I didn't care what I did or where it was. And if it meant, cutting up vegetables, then so be it. And that's what I did, to be honest. So
yeah.
Yeah.
No, you've obviously got the work ethic, because believe it or not, Chris, I meet students of mine that say to me, I'm a musician. Fuck that. I'm not going to be doing that shit. I want to perform, and they don't understand that, you've got to start at the bottom, and it's a hassle and it's a hustle, and it takes a long time. It's a marathon. And yeah, so I'm glad to hear that from you, because I think it's inspiring, and I think people need to hear it to know that that's the reality.
Well, it is, and it's a harsh reality. I think some people have the expectation of the music industry that it's all shits and giggles and backstage, parties and all that sort of stuff, and it really couldn't be any further from the truth. So there's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that go into it, and when I used to tour with Soundwave, you might get to see 1 or 2 songs of 2 bands for the entire day if you were lucky. Yeah. Out of 90 or 100 acts on the bill, you were just constantly working. If you're at a show, you're working. You're either with the tour management or production management backstage in an office, going through the budgets. You might go out and see a few songs, and really that's about the best that you can hope for. So it's certainly not the glamorous life that people make it out to be. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of them don't realise that when everyone else is partying and having fun, you're supposed to be working. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, what advice have you got for musicians or maybe some managers that they want to get their act on a big support? You're working with all these big bands, bringing all these big country, or being involved with bringing all these big bands to the country. What are some of the mistakes you see artists and managers make when they're trying to get your attention to get on a show?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's some of them have an expectation that, because they might be signed to a certain manager or a certain agency, that they have this sort of God-given right to be chosen for certain supports or anything like that. Some bands that just sort of come out of the woodwork, don't send any information when they're sending through the submission. Like, there won't even be a Facebook link to music sometimes, and most times I don't even respond to them. But if they're that lazy, sometimes I do, just to give them a kick in the ass to say, look, if you're going to submit for a tour, you need to supply music. I can't submit to an international manager your band name because they're not going to have the time to go and research you either. So I think first and foremost, just getting like an EPK, like a digital kit together with a short bio, a music link. Don't send us a 26 meg email with a downloadable song. Just send us a link to your music so it's easy to listen to. And from there, we sit down and we listen to all the bands that submit, and we then just pick 3 eyes through it. And the ones that we think suit best, we send to the managers. And, 8 times out of 10, they'll come back to us and say, you guys choose. 2 times out of 10, the band want to choose themselves. So, but also don't submit yourself until you think you're ready.
Yeah.
You put some energy and effort into your live show. Make sure that your social numbers are up at a reasonably decent level anyway. So when we're looking at it, I'm not looking at a Facebook page that has 46 likes on it, So make sure you've done a fair amount of hard work before you pitch yourself, especially to decent-sized international acts.
Yep, great advice. And in terms of the EPK, have you got any advice on which platforms to use? I'm always talking about onepagelink.com, or if it's your own website, or if it's a Reverb Nation. Is there anything that you prefer? Or?
Oh, no, I mean, look, we get them all, to be honest. So, we get quite a few from Reverb Nation. And so, no, not particularly. Look, as long as it looks smart, it's well laid out, it's easy to read, the links are very accessible, then we're not really too fussed about what format it comes in.
Okay, cool. What about advice for Chris, for anyone who wants to get into the touring side of the music industry? What's the best way to become a tour manager?
A tour manager?
Yeah.
A tour manager, that's a tough gig. I mean, a lot of my closest friends are tour managers, and I marvel at them, to be honest. So
professional babysitters?
Well, yeah, they are, but it's just you've got to have it in your blood.
Yep.
It's such a tough gig, and a lot of them have young families now, and I don't know how they do it, but getting into it, probably a pretty similar way just to get into the industry in general, which is to contact a tour manager and ask if you can come along to a show, ask them how they go about advancing, what mistakes they've made in the past. Can you give us some stories about some difficult overseas TMs and bands that you've dealt with? And look, as long as it remains all strictly confidential and you don't start blabbing about any stories you hear, then any of those tour managers will give you any time in the day they possibly can, because they know how hard a gig it is, and that it's really difficult to make a full-time career out of being a tour manager. So if you've got a burning passion for it, I would certainly suggest either contacting a promoter and saying, can you put me in touch with some of your tour managers? Or if you know some tour managers, just hit them up for advice. Go to a couple of shows and learn the ropes on the ground floor.
Yep. I often tell my students, Chris, I'd like your opinion on this, that if you don't have any contacts or networks, the best way to do that is to just volunteer your services for the local band and get in the van and make sure everything's happening good for them and learn, hands-on that way.
Yeah, look, that's certainly another way to go about it. My only concern with that is I wouldn't want to be putting any local developing acts with an inexperienced tour manager, I suppose. I think it's good to have someone with you that's got a little bit of an idea. I mean, one of the younger acts I'm managing at the moment's got a reasonably inexperienced tour manager with him, but he's learning on the job, and I work really closely with him, and that seems to be working okay at the moment. But generally speaking, I think anyone that's got a passion for it should make every effort they can to get in touch with young tour managers out there that are learning the ropes themselves and developing themselves, and learn from them, because then they can help the bands that they're touring with. So if they want to do a Sydney run with a local young band, they should know some information about it. They should know some information about the venue they're going into, so they're not walking into a blind. They can quite easily contact the venue as well and ask for some information, and just so they've got a little bit of information under their belt before they're walking in blindly to it.
Yep, cool. And I guess similar advice for people wanting to get into management, Chris, just find an act and start managing, do you think, or find a mentor and all that stuff you've been talking about today?
Yeah, I mean, look, finding an act is, there's no lack of artists out there, obviously, but finding the one that you think that you can develop and take to the next level is easier said than done. But yeah, I think, go into live shows first and foremost. Once you've seen an act a few times, if you think they cut it live, if you think they've got the songwriting chops, then yeah, it's just a matter of sitting down with them really and saying, look, I love what you're doing. Here's who I am. Here's what my background is. can we start working on some stuff together, even if it's like a voluntary thing for the first 3 months, and let's just see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put any pressure on the act financially to make any decisions necessarily up front. And then if you go through that sort of teething process and things seem to be going well for younger bands and managers, then you can maybe take that to the next step. And then that's when managers can reach out to other managers and ask for some advice, and because I can guarantee you the bands will be. Bands will be, they'll talk amongst themselves about, well, have you heard of this guy? What do you think? And that goes a long way. So, you've really got to put yourself in the best possible position to get that job.
Yeah. And Chris, even though you come from a punk DIY sort of background, are you doing things these days that some people would see like very formal? Like, are you giving your artist management contracts and getting them to sign so you're protecting yourself and things like that? Yeah. I mean, look, I have contracts with my artists, and obviously from a touring perspective, everything's got a contract with it. I might have started off very DIY, but my love for that music has remained the same, but the industry's changed a lot. I mean, I had a classic case. I won't mention the band, that I got screwed over pretty badly when I took over this act. They were in a lot of financial problems, and I sort of got them out of that successfully and put them on the straight and narrow again, and then was told in no uncertain terms that your services aren't welcome anymore. So that probably hit me pretty hard and gave me a pretty invaluable lesson about protecting yourself and not just assuming that the bands are always going to be there for you. So, and to be honest, I hear that story almost every day from managers. Yep. I was sitting down with the manager a couple of weeks ago at Big Sound, and I won't mention his name, but the exact same thing just happened to him, and that was a pretty high-profile artist, and he was just devastated by it. And it's happened with another friend of mine about a month ago. He'd been working with the band for almost 3 years, got him to an incredibly strong level internationally, and they did the same thing to him. So, yeah, I think it's incredibly important to protect yourself from a management perspective, and also promoting as well. Yep. So, fortunately, you can really only depend on yourself these days. So, look, I agree, and it's great coming from you, Chris, and to all my listeners, guys. There you go. You got to cover your ass, because even though it's music and it's fun, it's passion, it's also business, and you got to protect yourself and your investment, really. It even happened, Chris, when I interviewed Michael Browning, who managed AC/DC. He was saying if it wasn't for his contract when they sacked him, he would have, worked all that time to make them huge and wouldn't have been able to capitalise on when they got to that, sort of supreme level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's what every manager wants. I mean, you want to be able to take your acts from, young developing acts playing in front of no one to, arenas if you can. I mean, that's every manager's dream. It's incredibly rare for it to happen, but, that's the dream. So, I've certainly worked with acts at a very young level and taken them to gold and platinum status before, and, and you work with some acts where it just doesn't work, unfortunately, and that's every manager and record label and promoter in the world has gone through that 1,000 times. So you sort of can't get too sort of caught up about that sometimes. But as long as you protect yourself in the long term and surround yourself with really good quality people that you work with and create a really nurturing and caring environment for your artist, then I tend to think that the majority of those acts will stay with you.
Yep, excellent, mate, excellent. All right, Chris, well, you were also the general manager of Soundwave from 2003 to 2015. There's obviously been a lot said about it in the media, but I'd like to ask you, Chris, in your own words, in your opinion, what do you think happened with the demise of the Premier Festival?
Look, it was getting increasingly difficult for us to find headline acts, that's for sure. And 2013 was arguably the single biggest music festival in Australian history, and I don't think it will ever be beaten. We had Metallica and Linkin Park and Blink-182 and Garbage, The Offspring, Slayer, the list goes on.
Amazing.
And all the stars aligned that year. We knew when the programming was getting done that the festival would be a smash. We knew we would sell it out, but then there was also the concern of, well, how the hell do we back this thing up? And the event sold out in record time, obviously, and we probably could have sold another 200,000 tickets for it, really. But
wow.
But yeah, we sort of got to program the following year, and it was difficult. A lot of the headlining acts had already played the event, and there's only so many bands at that large level that can actually sell you tickets. And we also had the issue that, unfortunately for us, we'd sort of created this monster, and it was sort of starting to eat its own tail, where we had a lot of fans going, well, you've got this 2014 lineup, it's okay, but, where's the Metallicas and the Linkin Parks and the Blink-182s? And we're like, well, they played last year. I mean, we can't keep booking the same acts every year, and there is only one Metallica out there, and, we tried pretty desperately to, get Rage Against the Machine, and that was just never going to happen. And so, unfortunately for us, even though we were proud of the lineup we created, it really sort of fell short of people's expectations, and we just couldn't control people's expectations. So we tried to flip it around in 2015 and do the two sort of cities, back to back, and exchanging days, and that didn't work either. And that's when things went sort of pear-shaped for us, which was incredibly disappointing. And the biggest thing we find now is everyone now complaining that there's no Soundwave, and how badly they miss it. And
totally,
it's one of the old age adages, I suppose. You never know what you've got until it's gone. And I think it'll always have a special place in a lot of people's hearts in this industry, because it helped create and nurture a lot of businesses out of the ruins of it. And not just the ruins of it, but it put heavy music on the map in Australia, which unfortunately was always neglected. And not just from a media perspective, but it made record labels prick their ears up as well and go, you know what, there's something in this, from a domestic and an international perspective. And a lot of record labels and managers grew out of the back of it as well. And, to this day, I think you can, successfully say that Soundwave single-handedly created a huge amount of jobs and a lot of interest in the industry. So, and I think it will forever.
Yeah, totally. Chris, do you think in hindsight, with the benefit of that, is there anything you could have done differently? I guess I'm trying to squeeze out of you for anyone who's, wants to get into concert promotion and putting on festivals. Is there anything different you could have done? Or, like you said, you had these massive headliners and there's nowhere else you could go?
Look, there was certainly things that could have been done better, but I probably won't go into that for certain reasons. But I think that at the time we thought we were doing the right thing. We were on an incredible ride, and we thought that we were doing the right thing by booking a lot of younger bands and developing them. That probably could have been done a little better, where we sort of, at one point we had 9 stages running, and quite a few of those stages were technically really running at a significant loss, even though the festival was making good money. But in our eyes, we wanted to develop a lot of those young artists and give them a platform to perform on these big stages in front of a lot of people. And we thought, well, we could, on the back of that, then tour these artists and help break them in the country. And, that was successful to a degree, but there's only so many sort of artists out there that break that mould and take it to the next level. So, that probably could have been done a little better in hindsight, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. I certainly don't regret anything that's happened with it. It was an incredible chapter in my life, and I'll have lifelong friends because of it, and I learned a huge amount from AJ, and to this day he remains one of my closest friends, and there's obviously been a lot said about him, but as I said, I started working with him in 1995, so it's difficult for me to be upset at someone that I've been lifelong friends with, and who I'd learnt so much and I had so much respect for. So, and look, he would openly admit that, he would have loved to have done things better as well. But, that's life sometimes. You've got to sort of pick yourself up, dust yourself off and move on. So.
Yeah, totally. No, look, I agree, because he certainly gave my band our first real big national start as well. So, I always was good mates with AJ. What's he up to these days, Chris? Is he still around? Is he planning anything?
He's still around. We still speak probably, maybe once every week or something like that.
Oh, good.
We'll just sort of catch up and have a bit of a chat and talk about the industry and where it's at, and then so he's look, it's not my position to say what he's up to, but he started work with another company, and not within the music industry, but he seems to be in a pretty decent headspace again. So look, it's up to other people to comment on AJ. That's I've got my own personal relationship with him, so I'll probably leave it at that.
Well, when you see him, mate, tell him I said g'day. Would you do that for me?
I will do, sure.
All right. Because he was treated pretty harshly. I remember hearing his interview on Triple J's Hack, and I can just remember thinking, okay, I understand that he's got this big public thing that, you know, people love and all this shit's going on and who knows the truth, but he really did get grilled about his own personal finances of the business and the company, and I can remember just kind of thinking, you know, why would you have to feel like you have to answer that on national radio? I just thought that was a little bit strange anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing a decent amount of press at the time, I suppose, because there was a lot of sort of rumours and innuendo flying around, and look, he's a very much wear your heart on your sleeve sort of guy. So I think if anyone was sort of having a crack at him, look, he's got a very thick skin, obviously, but he would also put himself out there publicly, especially on Twitter. So I suppose part of his rationale was, well, if I'm going to put myself out there publicly, then I've got to take the good with the bad and stand up and have my say if people want to hear from me, which, you know, not a lot of people do. Yeah, totally. And both of you guys have been in the music media this week speculating or being asked to speculate about the Download Festival. Anything you want to talk about there or comment? Have you got any insights? No, not at all. I mean, Download's obviously a Live Nation-owned company, and it's run very successfully in the UK for a number of years, and I generally go over there each year. I love that festival, so I love the... well, the one thing I don't love about Download's the mud, but I was watching a few bands last year, almost knee-deep in mud, but that's okay. That's all part of the experience with any UK or European music festival, I think. But yeah, look, Download's an incredible festival. As I said, I've been there a number of times, and I've got a lot of close friends that are agents and managers that go to it. We always have a good time and watch a lot of bands and hang out and have a couple of drinks. And it's nice just to go over there, to be honest, and not have to worry about putting on a festival for a change and stressing about all the day-to-day and minute-to-minute and hour-to-hour stuff you've normally got to worry about. So,
yep.
Look, there's obviously a lot of talk about it coming out here, and I'm not too sure in what format it's going to come out in. But yeah, look, I wish them every success.
Yeah. Oh, it's just interesting seeing that you and AJ getting quoted in the music business press about getting your comments, and I suppose because of your background.
Yeah, and I think you're always going to be asked for comments when there's alternative or rock or metal or punk festivals coming through or major tours. You generally ask for quotes and things like that, which we generally don't give. So, but yeah, look, I think what it proves is that, for events like that, if they're looking to come into the market again, what Soundwave paved, I don't think there will ever be another Soundwave. I'll probably say that much, where, you've got 80 or 90 international acts on a bill. It's not really financially viable. It's an incredibly expensive place to tour and to get bands over here. So I don't think that model will exist anymore. So, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well, listen, Chris, it's been great to talk to you today. I know you've got a meeting in 5 minutes, so I'll let you go. But just to wrap it up, have you got any final words of wisdom for anyone listening to this that wants to break into the music industry? I mean, you've already given so much, but...
Look, I think, volunteering is incredibly understated, I think, in the industry. And a lot of the... actually, almost every single staff member we ever had at Soundwave started off as a volunteer within the organisation. Even in Destroy All Lines now, we have a number of volunteers that are now starting to work their way up into full-time roles. So I think there's a lot to be said for that, because what it does do is it shows people within organisations the passion you have for it. Mm-hmm. I would much prefer to give a job to a volunteer that spent a lot of time working on projects with us and showing that they've got a passion for it and there's no money, and they're willing to do anything they possibly can to get into the industry, as opposed to someone that might be coming out of, whether it's a TAFE course or whatever, and they have this expectation they're going to get a job straight away. So I think that would be my one piece of advice, is to go out, do some volunteer work, whether it's at it could be a record store, a record label, as I said, a publishing company, a promoter, a manager, whoever, and just get some experience. And you'll find that that'll go a long way. Yep,
absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, Chris O'Brien, General Manager of Touring for Destroy All Lines, I've really loved talking with you today, mate. It's been a great conversation, a great story. Appreciate your time, mate, and hope to see you very soon.
Thanks, Rodney.
Take care, Chris.
See you, mate.
Well, there you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Chris. Once again, some reoccurring themes there about believing in yourself and having a positive mindset and working hard and having realistic expectations. You know, a lot of it's not rocket science. A lot of it seems pretty flippant and, like I said, it seems very simple. But again, these themes keep reoccurring whenever I speak to these high-level, successful industry experts. So there's got to be something in it. Anyhow, if you'd like to connect with Chris, go and check out his management company at facebook.com/What Vibe Management. That's What Vibe Management. And you can also email Chris. He gave me his email address to give to you guys. It's just chris.o'brien@destroyallines.com. Guys, if you're enjoying my podcast, and I really hope you are, if you're still listening to me here, I'm assuming that maybe you are, unless I'm just on in the background or something. But if you are enjoying the podcast and you haven't already, head over to iTunes and subscribe. That way you won't miss an episode. And if you're feeling really, really like you want to help me out, a rating and a review, an honest rating and review in iTunes always helps out us podcasters as well. Don't forget, I've got a 100% free video mastermind lecture available as well over at musicbusinesslecture.com. So if you'd like to hear me interrogate one of the world's best metal managers, that's where I put the hard word onto Andy Farrow. He's the guy that's the brains behind successful metal bands like Opeth and Devin Townsend and Paradise Lost, to name just a few. He's probably the most successful music industry entrepreneur I know. He's got his hand in everything. I call him the octopus. So if you'd like to hear me grill him and you haven't checked out that lecture yet, musicbusinesslecture.com. All right, so before I leave for today, I'd like to offer you another great quote, and this one's from Bob Marley, and Bob said, "One good thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain." I thought that was pretty cool. Anyhow, guys, until next time, keep working hard towards your goals, keep believing in yourself. My name's Rodney Holder, and I'm signing off now for musicbusinessfacts.com. Take care.
You've been listening to the Music Business Facts podcast. For more essential music business tips and information, visit musicbusinessfacts.com.